One of my notes is like, this book is Fight Club but for the girls. Yeah, I stand by that. Hello and welcome back to my channel, or hi if you're new. My name is Emma, filmmaker, occasional booktuber, and in today's video, annual video of everything I read last year. So this is my video of everything that I read in 2023. I'm pretty pleased with myself. In 2023 I read a total of 4,397 pages, and I also read, well, finished 22 books, which I am dyslexic, so I'm very pleased with this. If you like all year, you can follow along. My good read is Angeline. For 2023, I set myself the intention of really reading more like classics. And I know it sounds silly because my booktube niche is the fact that I actually read classics, but I didn't feel like I'd read that much recently. So I really sort of set myself the intention of like, look, 2023, we're just gonna read all things we feel like are classics, or things where I feel like it's all non-fiction and helpful or educational, whatever your interpretation of that is, right? And I must say, looking at this pile, do you want to see the pile? I feel like I more or less achieved that. I'm pretty pleased with myself. When am I not pleased with myself? I'm pretty damn pleased with the assortment of books that we've got here. I tried to organise them to do this in some kind of order. Does not work. So I made a good effort, I think, especially at the end of the year, to read sort of things that, like, you know when I say if I buy books because I feel like it's missing from my library? Well, eventually I do have to read them, so I kind of actually read some of the books that I'd been meaning to. It's this kind of thing of like, it feels as though you've ticked something off like a to-do list that's buried in the back of your brain, and it's incredibly satisfying. Just reading those sorts of books where, you know, you haven't read blah 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 blah. Reading those books, first of all, a lot of them genuinely are very excellent, but also let's get started. So as ever, we're going to do this in chronological order of me reading these books because, yeah, organising them just did not work. So, the first thing I read in 2023 was The Princesse de Clèves by Madame de Lafayette. This was so high on my like to read list for, on my TBR forever. So a decent amount of these books. Some of these I bought and read immediately, which is again, something I did not know I was capable of doing. This is a book by Madame de Lafayette, a 17th century book that is set in the 16th century, so it's a historical court romance. Oh my gosh, this is just of its time. This is like its romance blockbuster kind of book. Like, this is genuinely what this is, which I think if you don't know the context around it, if you don't know that sort of, you know, even just like literary history in terms of just book history, you think that that sounds dumb, but people have always loved books, and we've always loved silly books. This is a silly book. You need to remember these things in their context. This is not like a stuffy classic that you can't, just absolutely cannot get into and you need to do a degree in order to understand it. Now, this is like basically the pop culture trash of its time. It's so fun. It's about a young girl whose mother brings her to the French court to find a husband, and sort of the, I guess, the shenanigans that ensue are the fact that she's supposed to marry this man, but what about this guy, and oh, but what if you could have him, and oh, it's like that courtly romance, but like very much, in my opinion, it's a little bit more tongue-in-cheek. It's not like an Arthurian romance or anything, but it's very much just, it's for the girls. That's how I can describe it. I know that sounds silly, but it's very much for the girls. And in a lot of ways, Madame de Lafayette is credited hugely with, you know, really the beginnings of fiction. And that's why the idea of like, oh, women's fiction drives me nuts, because women really invented fiction. And I will stand by that statement. Women really invented the novel, they invented fiction. This is also significantly shorter than some of the things that were written at the time, which were these romans fleuves, really chunky novels, or actually serializations that were published in installments. You can kind of think about how modern fanfiction is written in installments, often ridiculously long. It's the same goddamn thing, but just because one is much older now, that you start to revere things once they get older, but really, if you look at them in their context, it's the same fucking thing. It's cool to just know that, because it demystifies a lot of these things, and it makes them feel more human and accessible. As always, part of my why I read the classics argument. But really, if you want to get a little bit started and you don't know where to go, read this. It's historical fiction of its time, and even now, you know, this is just, it's fun. It's people running around in in princess dresses. It's one of these things that does have more emotional depth than other older things that I've read, because it's very much about feelings and like even like little things that happen and just like, oh my gosh. Because as well, when you have a world like this where, you know, the stakes are so high even for a kiss, that then even like hands grazing or somebody looking at you just becomes the most like thrilling thing you've ever read. I really enjoyed this. This is so up my street. If you like princess dresses, a little bit of a disastrous romance attempts, and just, you know, pretty palaces, this is for you. I love this book. The translation is by Nancy Mitford, who is another one of my favourite authors. I read so many of her books. She did the biographies that I really like on Louis the XIV. She did one on Madame de Pompadour, she did one on Voltaire, she did one on Frederick the Great. I love these books. They're not necessarily the most historically accurate thing ever, but they're really, really fun. For me, who finds reading history books often so dry, really engaging. So it's her translation and her introduction. I really, really enjoyed this. What does this say? Humans are such silly little creatures though. Can we adapt this for a film? There is a film adaptation, there is a French 1960s adaptation, and there is a French adaptation which takes the story but it adapts it to a modern context. It's got Léa Seydoux in it. Oh yes, there's this whole thing about a letter as well. Misunderstandings, misinterpretations, we love. Oh, and that's the other thing, is the main character, what's her name? Mademoiselle de Chartres. She is fictional, but a lot of people in here are real characters. They were real people. Madame de Lafayette is like writing in a courtly context herself. A lot of these titles obviously get passed down, so then it's this thing of you're reading about like a historical version but it's somebody's relative, and then the Duke of Orleans is still a person at that point. So there's also the thing of like that layer of context of like, ooh, like I know that you're writing about the historical person and like their relative, but like does this work on transposing these things onto them? And like, ooh, it's gossip. Women gossip, women have always gossiped, and then they wrote this down and it was really fun. This has so much humour to play around with, oh my god. Really recommend. This was first published in 1678. Lovely. Next up on my list is something that I bought this years and years and years ago at my mother's recommendation, obviously. As you can imagine, this was also my mother's recommendation. Hello, if you're new, my mother is an academic. She tells me what to read, I listen, and then I tell you what to read. This is Umberto Eco's The Name of the Rose. It's again historical fiction. Historical fiction is just my favourite thing in the world, right? But Umberto Eco was a professor of many things at the University of Bologna, and in the end he sort of just put it all in a book. This is like, you know, it's like, oh, I'm a medievalist and I do semantics and semiotics and blah, blah, blah. I'm gonna put it in a book. This is just like my fun, this is like my passion. Could you argue that this is just Eco's passion project? Probably yes. The year is 1327. This is set in a monastery and it is kind of, yeah, I'm gonna say it's a murder mystery. It is a murder mystery. Every day a different monk turns up dead and it's just, oh god, why is this happening? Where is this going? It's like a little bit of a detective mystery thing. There is a film adaptation, I watched it, it's not very good, but the main character, William of Baskerville, is played by Sean Connery, and that is exactly how I read him. Like, I think that's just excellent casting. I will say, there is a lot of like heavy medieval Catholic history in here. It's all about heresy and if certain like sects of monks are actually heretics or not, and this all these kind of like political discussions. There's a lot of history to read, and I ended up on Wikipedia more than once being like, what? I don't understand. If that is your thing and you enjoy that kind of stuff, excellent. I'm Catholic, so like I like enjoyed that kind of stuff in that sense, because I'm like, okay, this feels like my history as well. It's also got a lot to do with when the papacy came from Rome, was in Avignon, and then for a time we were both there, and then it's called a schism. Which schism is it? There's many schisms. I love me for like leaving me notes. People ask me, why do you write notes in your books? I'm like, this is why, because otherwise I can't remember what I'm talking about. There's like a schism and there's a great schism of where the church splits. Historical murder mystery set in the Italian monastery in the year 1327. That's what it is. It's so enjoyable. Yes, you learn a decent amount of history, religious history, in like not a totally mind-numbingly boring way. If I were to read the stuff I'd learnt from this in a non-fiction book, like I would have burnt it, because that sounds painfully boring. And there are sections where I only managed to read like 3 pages a day because it was just so much, but my mother said when I bought it, this was a very long time ago, she said the first 100 pages are a little bit of penance, once you get through there, it's really, really fun. And it is. And there's a library, and there's a secret. Does it threaten the church or no? Oh my gosh, it's like potions, and how has this person been murdered? And oh my gosh, what's going on? It's really fun. You want a library with the secrets? This is your book for a library of secrets. If you've ever even had like an inkling of like, gosh, I wonder like what's like in the like Vatican libraries. If you're that kind of person and have read any of the Dan Brown books, this is just excellent. And also, I'm smug as fuck because it's like 600 pages and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Am I surprised that I enjoyed it? I'm not surprised that I enjoyed it because it's excellent, it's well written. I very much enjoyed the characters and the whole thing, and one of the characters is based on Borges, and like Borges has obviously written The Labyrinth, so it's like related to that. And then it's just so fun when you read some, this is my favourite thing, I've said this before, my favourite thing is when you read people who are so insanely passionate about what they do, their things. That's why I love Mitford, because she's so passionate about the French, and especially about sort of the same time periods in France that I'm interested in. She loves it, you know, she did the introduction to Princesse de Clèves, like that's her, like, not she translated it, like that's her level of passion. And then with Echo it's the same. You can feel his level of like love, care and attention to the things that matter to him. And so reading those people who put that care into their work and that love, you can feel that love and that passion. Those are unequivocally the best people to read. Calvino is the same. The people who love what they're doing so deeply that they're just like, I want to write about my thing. They will never disappoint you. This book will not be for everybody, I assure you it's not for everybody, but for those who get through the first 100 pages, who end up being worthy, you will enjoy this immensely. Because also, you know, if you don't get through the first 100 pages, the rest of the book just isn't for you. I really loved that book, way more than I thought I was going to, which is always a really nice surprise. And also I did really think, starting it, I was like, I'm gonna have to give up on this book, and I didn't. That's how I felt about reading Crime and Punishment. Name of the Rose is my 2023 Crime and Punishment, essentially. Next up then, I was like, I'm gonna read something short. But also, no, I'm full of poop. One of you recommended this to me. One of you recommended to me Venus and Furs by, which is just, it's such a good name, it's based on a painting, by Leopold von Sacher-Masoch, which is where you get the word masochism from. This is a woman who has this man who's kind of like pretending to be her servant. The back says, a shocking exploration of masochism, narcissism, sexual power. I don't think it's that at all. Like this, I thought there were going to be like Sard level fucked up smut stuff in here. No, I just did not find this book anywhere near shocking. Maybe I'm desensitized, but that's a different question. I was expecting Sard levels of fucked uppery, and that's just not this. Like not even a little bit. This guy has a mistress and he sort of tends to her whims, and it's just not that interesting. Of course I've written I support women's wrongs and women's rights. They travel around a bit, they end up in a villa in Italy, which is, that sections are really nice, especially sort of the descriptions of the places that they are, but it's really not that interesting. Her name is Wanda, which is just funny. Do you love me? I want you to love me. She produced a short dagger. I recoiled as its blade flashed before my eyes. I really believed she was about to kill me, but she laughed and cut the ropes that were binding me. Yeah, it's like, it sort of teases you that she could be more terrible than she is, and then she doesn't, and it's just not. This fell flat. It's really not worth reading in my opinion, and also getting a copy of it was really difficult. More of a lurid tale of sexual obsession and perversion. No, it wasn't really that at all, and it's not a daring succession to the writings of Sard. Like, that's what it says on the back. It's just not true whatsoever. It didn't do anything, there's nothing shocking about it. Maybe that's a historical context thing, because I'm just looking at the pile of smutty books that I have over there. Yeah, no, I think if Sacha Masoch read those books, he'd keel over, because this just wasn't very interesting. That was boring. It did none of the things that I wanted it to do. You know, Sard's Juliet is a much more interesting look at a woman in power using her sexual power. And also I feel like the book kind of focuses more on that aspect than like him being a masochist aspect. It's like it tries to be Juliet from the other point of view, but then fails horribly because it doesn't do the thing that it would have been better off doing. I don't know, I feel like it failed on a lot of points, and I don't think the writing was very good. Of course it's a translation, but still, you know, Princesse de Clèves is a translation, Name of the Rose is a translation, and they are banging. Not my cup of tea. I guess I'll stick to Sard? Do with that information what you wish. Mama? Hi.
Hi, nicely kitted out, lovely woman.
Thanks.
You look...
I can see you in the reflection.
Hello everybody, I'm here.
Next up though is more literary pornography. Erotica. I bought one of these short ones of Angeline, the Veiled Woman. I don't really know what it was. It is just a collection of her short stories, which are all more erotic and pornographic in nature. And what's quite interesting is these are little sort of vignettes, is how they feel, of different women exploring their sexuality and their sensuality into like different like ways, not just, you know, not just classic straight sex. What are my notes? So it was about the pursuit of pleasure, sex for sex's sake, hint of liberalism. Liberalism. Well, yeah, but libertinism, sorry. Women and agency and their sexual desires, wants and needs for pleasure. Yeah, sex for sex's sake for women, rather than it just being a case of sex for procreation or for men's desires. And yes, I love the female gaze is one of my notes, because that's always nice to see those things through her eyes. They're like little vignettes, moments or other memories, diaries, you know, lots of little secrets. It feels like you're reading little moments that you should be reading. It's like, it does feel like you've picked up somebody's diary, because some of these are from first person. One of these, she disappears to like a sex party, like in the woods, kind of like in Gilmore Girls, where Rory goes to that like sort of like secret society in the woods, like that, but like making an orgy. That's like one of the short stories in this, like to give you a sense. It's short, it's fun, it's a good introduction to Angeline, because she is a person as well, is very, very interesting. Who was she having an affair with? Henry Miller? Or was she like part of Henry Miller's like throuple with his wife? Something like that. She herself is a really interesting person, and that is why I bought her other book, which was A Spy in the House of Love. This, I bought the collected version of her short stories, which that for me, because now some of those short stories were in that little one, and that's definitely more up my street, because this as a novel I found, again, I had expectations that really fell flat. Like I had enjoyed her short stories so much, but I expected this to be really similar, and it's really not. It's about a woman in, what is it, 1950s New York? Oh my god, I had notes. Yeah, 1950s New York. She's sort of floating around with her marriage and trying to figure out really who she is, and has different lovers and things, and goes to the seaside. I really did not like her writing. I felt like this world was really insular. The world she describes as insular, but also her like internal world is also very insular, and you just don't get much out of either. It's very formless in a way. Like there's very little of it you can grab onto to understand what is going on. You know, you can look at that as this feeling of like she's walking around her life in this like daze, because that's how it feels to read, but there's very little that you can sort of like grab onto and make sense of. She's a woman daring to enjoy the sexual license that men have always known. Yes, but it's just not that. There's also like a bit of crime, mysterious element into it. Is she being followed? Is she not? Is her husband got a private detective on her trying to figure out what she's up to? I think it's also though a lot about, even though she has like different partners and stuff, she's searching for something in those partners which she just never gets. And she tries to find it through sex and just doesn't get it. Through Sabina's affairs with 4 men, she lays bare all the duplicity and fragmentation of the self that is involved in the search for love. That's a quote, that's not me. Yeah, it's like she lays herself open and bare, and because she is looking for love, not just sex. That's the main thing, is she's looking for love via sex, and she's not finding love because she's going via sex. Yeah, her writing is so fluid, her sense of time very fluid, unanchored and indistinct. It's like you're reliving the events as Sabrina narrates them. This is not a first-hand present experience. It's like parts remembered, parts misremembered, feeling like it's a daze, maybe like a time in her life where the character, not Angeline, where she just wasn't 100% there, I guess, in a way, and then trying to remember that, and it just kind of feels almost like playing telephone with a story, but then with yourself. Oh yeah, diary, memory journal, and nothing is explained to you, the reader, because it's not for your eyes. Yes, that is the one. It feels like a diary. Nina's work kind of feels like you've picked something up that you're not supposed to be reading, which is very fun, but this didn't give like the level of... I didn't find it very exciting, and I didn't find it as interesting as I wanted to, and I also feel like, you know, plot-wise, it just kind of left me high and dry, because there wasn't... I kind of finished reading it like, oh, what was the point of that? And the ending was also just kind of like, it felt like it was a point at which she just decided to stop writing rather than it was conclusive in any way. But again, it lends itself to that idea of interpreting it as like somebody's diary that you're not supposed to be reading, but then as the reader you're just kind of like, so not what I wanted it to be, and it was a shame, and really didn't vibe with her writing style as much in that as I did in the short stories. Is what it is. It was short, so it was fine. The next thing that I read, because you lot told me to so many times, was If We Were Villains. And I did not like it. Oh my god. I know that everybody really enjoys this book. It's got a big sort of almost little cult following, especially when you read it in tandem with Secret History. I still think Secret History is absolutely excellent. This was... It's a group of drama students at an elite conservatoire who are specialised in Shakespeare. And look, don't get me wrong, I like Shakespeare, you know, it's something that's very prominent in British culture, you really can't escape it. Me and my friends do occasionally quote the lady dog protest too much, methinks, at one another, and it's very fun like reading this in terms of how it like blends in a lot of sort of Shakespearean themes and all this kind of stuff, and when they quote it I think it's very fun because I'm just like, oh, I get this too, oh my gosh, I'm smart, like please like validate my intelligence. Like if you're doing a literature degree, like yeah, you know, but it wasn't very good. The language used, like the way that she writes, the way that it's written is just really boring. It's pedestrian, it's dull, and for something that is sort of situating itself within a literary academic world, you kind of would expect it to just even try to just be a little bit more, just a higher register. And I'm not saying, you know, it has to be academic or anything, but it feels like a silly little plot in a silly little book, which is trying really hard not to be a silly little book, but it can't do anything more than what it's already doing. It feels like it's not capable of being as smart as it tells you it is. It makes itself appear to be very intelligent, whatever. It does not live up to that. I also found that just, you know, okay, it's dark academia. It's a group of friends who commit murder. What is incredible about the Secret History is the way that it works with privilege and the way that it works with, you know, privilege, consequences, and that sort of thing of like, okay, we live in this world, we feel like we can get away with anything. Theirs is a world of privilege without consequence, and then suddenly, fuck, there are consequences, what the fuck do we do? And also, it's something that Donna Tartt hasn't shied away from making you dislike her characters. I don't think that this book does that. She sort of moralizes it away to make you feel like it wasn't really their fault, and the injustices that someone has gone to jail for something they haven't done. Whereas in The Secret History, you know, they're all guilty and they're all terrible and they're all just like then at each other's throats. Like that is really great. This just, you know, because that's like really morally dubious, and then you have like the thing of like you like this character but you know that they're terrible and oh it's really hard. This just doesn't do that. Like I just didn't find the conflict, I just didn't think it was good for what it was. I was so let down when, you know, you finally find out about, you know, the death that's happened, the murder, and then you're just kind of like like they didn't do it, they just let him die. I actually think that's the same thing, and it just wasn't anywhere near as like morally complex as I think it wanted to be. I read it really fast. I read it in 4 days, which I was quite proud of, but then that's because it was a very easy read. It's an easy read, like that's really all it is. I think it's like a nice book, but I don't think it's worthy of the hype. It's like the kind of thing where I feel like people have overhyped it because we don't know any better. It's my honest take on that. There was a really good review that I read about If We Were Villains, which like basically said every issue that I had with it. Where is it gone? Oh my god, I gave it a 1. I forgot about that. I gave it 1 star. Oh my god, I wrote such a long thing on this. Your book talk has no taste whatsoever. I stand by that. This is potentially be so good, but it honestly sucked from the moment they discovered Richard's body. Yeah, because that's the thing, is they don't do anything, they actually don't do anything wrong. They don't do anything wrong. I think it's because it's left in a grey area of like, did they do anything? Like, and I don't feel like you're even mystery. I don't think that creates the tension that you think it does, of like having this grey area, because now I'm wondering like, I kind of don't really care care. In this kind of context with this book, it's not about if you tell us and then we're worried about consequences, but because we don't know if they did it, we're not worried about consequences, so there are no stakes. And then if there are no stakes, where's your tension? Oh yeah, she doesn't exist. And the other thing I said is it's about agency, right? Because it's this grey thing of like, they didn't do anything with Richard, like they didn't kill him, so they had no agency in something that has happened. And because you have no agency, like they haven't made that decision. Like yes, they made a decision not to save him necessarily, but even if the book basically makes you, even if they had tried to, he might have died anyway. So like, did they really, like, I feel like they didn't do anything that bad. You wanted a tragedy, they should have conspired against Oliver and manipulated his goodwill into making him sacrifice himself when they're just pushing him to do so that he can go to jail in their stead because he's a bystander of the group, and then reveal this to him so he knows that like they fuck him over. But they don't, they just banding together a bit too much. It's the classic mistake of wanting people to like your characters so much, you make them good and then inadvertently boring because she lets stuff happen to them. That was my other gripe with this. She has let things happen to them, they have not done things themselves. Savannah, okay. Actually, if you guys want to read out, I'll put up my entire Goodreads review here if you guys want to pause that. She gave us so many instances of ways that they could have got out of their situation that it was just, felt like they're supposed to be smart enough to figure this out, right? Like they're not believable characters. And if your characters aren't believable enough as real people, if you don't pad them out enough, you don't believe why they do things. You can't believe they would justify their actions, and therefore it all becomes to feel really unbelievable. Yeah, I think there's too many instances of plot being priority. In other words, I think she spent a lot of time on things that were unnecessary. You wasted so many words on plot that you should have spent on character, because I am so unemotionally involved that I literally don't care about the characters by the end. Like, I literally do not care. How could I? They're cardboard cutouts of the roles they play. I know nothing about any of these characters. You don't know them at all. It's also superficial. They don't feel human. And I think that's kind of because they're playing these roles, right? You could have done so much with the fact that, are they in conflict with their roles? In what way are they in their conflict with the roles? Like, are they themselves playing roles as themselves? Because that's the only thing they know how to do. So you have so many possible ways you can work with, and they felt like cardboard cutouts. It's trash. Like, it's so disappointing. There's so many issues with it, there's so many plot holes. It just utterly feels unbelievable because she just never made the characters feel like people. They're just characters. The most poignant tragedy about this book is that, you know, it was not the murder itself or the death itself, it's the fact that it could have been so much better. People who rave and rave and rave about that one, I can understand if you thought it was fun and enjoyable. Of course, you're absolutely at your leisure to, like, that's fine. But when people say like this is gonna be one classic, no, it's just not. When people put it's like, oh, it's very highbrow, I'm like, no, it's not. It's a fun little book, like it is, it's nice and stuff, but it's not exceptional. It's not as good as people say it is. We've said it before, I'll say it again, BookTok has no taste. Anyway, moving on, I was a bit, you know, a little bit depressed after reading that because I was like, this could have been so much better, but it wasn't. And I picked this up, yes, again, because I saw it on the internet, because that's where I get many of my book recommendations, on Instagram reels that are just TikToks re-uploaded onto there. But the title was cute, so I kind of really bought it based on that. This is Raymond Carver's What We Talk About When We Talk About Love. This is a collection of short stories. When I started reading this, I thought it was going to be like, oh, maybe it's going to fit like, you know, not Dolly Parton, Dolly Allerton's book, or Natasha Lund's book. And I was like, yeah, it's going to be like that. No. To know this collection of short stories, what you must know about it is really more about an absence of love. This is what it is like when there is no love there. That's really more how it feels. This is sort of set in like what, like the American Midwest, like 1950s and 60s, I think that's right. God bless my notes. It's about 1960s, 80s generation of writers, Watermelon Sugar, A Good School, On the Road. You know what I mean? That's kind of how I categorised it for myself. The liminal spaces of the mind. Short stories are also fun because they start in the middle. I do like that about short stories. It's a question of like what really is love. It's messy, it's complicated, it's unsatisfying, and it can be lonely. So yes, love, but not necessarily to be in love, more maybe the cost of love and consequences of love, and when is it unconditional love, when is it not, love by all of its names, but also, yeah, that flip side, when love has gone wrong, when love has ended, when love is over. All the bits about love that do not make you feel warm and fuzzy, because this book did not make me feel warm and fuzzy, but it certainly made me just go, fuck, because this is so much more a reality and realism. The reason we love romances so much is because it's something that is very often very fleeting, and we search for it incessantly, especially just the way like Western culture does, right? So when you stop chasing that very specific sort of like form and moment of love and you see what's left, you're like, oh, it's this. Yeah, these are short stories. Some of them are absolutely brilliant. The ones in here that I starred, if you ever read this, as being particularly good were Gazebo, The Bath, The Third Thing That Killed My Father Off, Everything Stuck to Him, and What We Talk About When We Talk About Love. This is really, really, really good. Yeah, this whole idea of like portraits of people's relationships, people being totally inconsequential. It's really more about like nobodies, should we say. And because it's short stories, it sort of keeps you at that sort of spectator length, spectator distance, and it's really more a nobody's love story. Like lack thereof, right? Parts of this just got to me, and I think it's really, really sad, and also just really, really good. I really, really, really rate this. Oh yeah, there's a lot of drinking in a lot of these stories. It's like they drink so they can't say what they're too scared to, or they drink so they don't need to talk. And it's a lot of male voices on the point of view of love, family, relationships. Love or love thereof. It's quiet. It's very quiet, these stories. And they're very like anticlimactic. I think we all search for like a great love story, and then sometimes people get disappointed with what they get because they've been promised so much by movies and songs and books. And then when they get to their own love story, they're disappointed, but it's not this big whirlwind, and it's like, that's not what most relationships are. There's a reason that those kind of love stories are actually fiction. They're not what most people get. Life is a lot of slow, insignificant moments, and this really, really captures that, and I think this is absolutely excellent, and I highly, highly recommend it. Oops, I just remembered I was supposed to... I'm doing a video on like short things to read to like get you into classics. I was meant to talk about a couple of these books really fast because I'm going to talk about them in my next video. That said, I'm going to skip through the next three because I read these in order. I read Invisible Cities by Calvino, I read Medea by Euripides, and I read Margaret Atwood's Penelopiad. Calvino, excellent. It's like little portraits of Venice. Well, it's like little descriptions of lots of little different cities, but in the end, everything's Venice. And I think this is really fun, it's really playful, it's so Calvino. I just really enjoyed it, especially if maybe if you're, you know, if you are an architect or somebody who builds things like cities, or well, like, you build cities, but you know what I mean, like if you're very designy and creative in that sense, you'll enjoy this. Medea is a classical play about a woman who marries Jason of the Argonauts, and essentially sort of their saga and their marriage and their like children, and their like everything goes to shit, and there's a reason there is the handprint on the front. That's why I bought it, because I was like, fuck this cover. Don't judge a book by its cover, you can shut up, everybody does. Really cool. I think it's a real fun, cool cover. Really good. I really enjoyed that play. Haven't read a play in ages. Really recommend. I'd love to see it now. And Penelopiad is Margaret Atwood's retelling of the Iliad, the Odyssey, well, the Iliad and Odyssey, from Penelope's point of view, from her point of view, but from the afterlife. So it's Penelope telling the story from her point of view from the afterlife. Those are the words in the order that I wanted. If you are very much into those like modern retellings of Greek myths and classics from female perspectives and the female gaze, really give it a read. I don't think it's particularly exceptional or anything, but it's really a great way into like that like little subgenre. I really enjoy it. But I think it was just a bit, it's good to read, it's easy to read, but I guess I just wanted something different. I don't really know, I think I just wanted her to be a heroine. But is that a me problem, or is that a problem with the book? Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes it's hard to be like, is this just not what I wanted? Or not what I thought it was going to be? Or is it actually, has the book done anything wrong? Or has it just not met my expectations that were different from what it had to offer for some reason? The only note I shall read you for now, you have to wait for the video. The only note I shall read you from this is, LMAO, the whole point of this book is how women get forgotten unless they're well fit. That, you don't need to know any more about that, honestly. The last book that I'm going to share in this portion of the video, I'm splitting into two parts. Of course I am. Me, talk too much? Never. The last book I'll share in this video was about I Read the Virgin Suicides. It is the book that is the basis for Sofia Coppola's first film of the same name. I have long had an absolute love for that film. Really do. And for a long time I didn't know it was a book. I didn't. It's a book by Jeffrey Eugenides? For a long time I didn't know it was a book, and then at one point I was in Waterstones and I saw it and I was like, oh. So I decided to pick it up. I know the story quite well. I just was very, very curious. And also, again, the thing is, being somebody who had, you know, mental health wise, more troubled teenage years, I am glad that I only sort of, I think I knew it was a book, but I think I shoved that down until I guess I was ready, which is what I now am. So I think for me, part of why I wanted to read it was like to revisit that stage of my life. Sort of similar thing I'll say about The Bell Jar, which I also read this year, was that 2023 was that I finally feel like ready to read these kind of books again, because I'm so okay now, if that makes sense. I'm like so well healed from all of that kind of stuff that I can now handle going back there, whether it's through fiction or film, to not relive it, but just try and understand myself through the point of view of someone else. So this is a book about the Lisbon sisters. They are 5 girls who, one by one, all end up taking their own lives, and it's told from the point of view of the boys that live across the street, set in like suburban, is it Midwestern? Where is this set outside of? Like suburban America. It's like a group of Catholic girls. The film has done the book justice, is absolutely what I will say. Reading it felt exactly how watching that film felt. And I think for me it was very, very useful, obviously, to have the visuals of the film as a reference. And I did imagine the girls in this the way they looked in the film. It's heartbreaking. It's just such a slow descent. Because of the way that they're characterised, because of the way that it's written, you know, you just... It's so sad. It's sad, and it is a beautiful book. I think maybe there's something a little bit Lolita-ish about it, I guess. Especially with Lux, who she's the second youngest one. She's 14 and goes on like absolute escapades as increasingly troubling things happen to the family that cause them to become absolute recluses, and then slowly but surely it kind of house sort of becomes not a pressure cooker, but it sort of starts to very slowly implode and degrade, and then sort of the house falling into disrepair while the family's still living there is very much in line after the death of the youngest girl who dies first. Sort of like how their grief wraps them up completely and how they become recluses, and how the knock-on effect of that, and it just sort of gets worse and worse and worse and worse. It's a painful book to read, but it is a very, very good book. It's that kind of thing where like I don't know if I could say that I enjoyed it because it's sad. One of my notes is like, this book is Fight Club but for the girls. Yeah, I stand by that. And then the question of, is this female rage? I feel like it's definitely a lot of repression. You can tie Catholicism up into that all you like. I think this is just a really good book. Really recommend it. I recommend reading it in tandem with the film. I think the film is still one of my absolute favourites. It hurts my soul. I can't believe that it's Coppola's first film. Yes, of course, you know, she's the daughter of an insanely famous and talented director, but this is so her. I watched Priscilla recently. I really have such an undying love for virgin suicides. It's a phenomenal film, and also I'm so happy to say it's also a really good book. It's just sad, man. But very good, and very worth the read. And very much like melancholia and almost like maddening sort of like nurse of like American suburbia, like that kind of claustrophobic sort of thing of it, and like this trapment, encroachment, sort of like really, really strong visuals for this as well. Then it doesn't surprise me that Coppola was able to do it so well with that film. I only read Kirsten Dunst's Lux, like that's the only way that I could imagine her, and I think it's bang on. There we go, that is the first half of everything that I read in 2023. I will do my utmost best to make sure that the second half of this video is up as soon as possible. If you're watching this at a later date, I'll make sure it's linked down below for you. But yes, thank you very, very much for watching, like, subscribe and all that jazz, and I will see you very soon. Goodbye. Another note I wrote in here was, there's a boy and he reads, and he read this book a couple months ago. When was the last time there was a boy? Oh god, what am I gonna do? That's so funny.